presentation from the General Motors Research Laboratories and also California Institute of Technology. The title is Kinetics of NO Reduction by Carbon Monoxide over Supported Rhodium Catalyst, Isotopic Cycling Experiments. The authors are B.K. Cho, B.H. Shanks, and J.E. Bailey, and Byong Cho will present the paper.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich. Today, I'll be talking about the kinetics of nitric oxide reduction by carbon monoxide over supported rhodium catalyst through the cycling experiment using C13 carbon monoxide. As you may probably know already, this nitric oxide reduction by carbon monoxide is very important for automotive emission control catalysis. Brent Shanks was a summer student to our laboratory during this study, while J. Bailey was a consultant to the laboratory. The catalysts we used in this study are rhodium alumina catalyst and rhodium celia with very low loading of rhodium. And we adjusted the sample weights to make sure that the same amount of rhodium is in the same volume of catalyst samples for all experimental runs. And you may also note that the celia support has very small BAT surface area compared to alumina support. In our experiment, the reactant pulses were introduced to the fixed bed reactor made of 1/8" stainless steel tube, and a space velocity of 82,000 per hour, which is a typical condition for automobile catalytic converter operating condition. And the reactor exit composition was monitored through by mass spectrometer. The cycling scheme we used in this study are as follows. Separate nitric oxide and carbon monoxide pulses, not their mixtures. Separate pulses were introduced to a reactor in a square pulse like this, and the C13 carbon monoxide were used to separate nitrous oxide from carbon dioxide in mass spectrometer analysis. And the nitric oxide and carbon monoxide concentration were 800 ppm in that cycling scheme. Even though we did symmetric and asymmetric cycling in general, my talk will be strictly on symmetric cycling today, in which case the nitric oxide, the duty fraction for the cycling operation, which is designated F, is here 0.5. Before showing you our results, I'd like to draw your attention to the reaction pathways in the NO-CO reaction. The nitric oxide reduction by carbon monoxide can go in two ways. The first one is the complete reduction of nitric oxide, which occurs between one NO and one CO to produce nitrogen. And the other one is incomplete reduction of nitric oxide between two nitric oxide and one carbon monoxide to produce nitrous oxide. And in my opinion, this incomplete reduction path of nitric oxide has not been well properly recognized so far, as we will see later in my talk, more of that. And possible exception of this negligence on the importance of this reaction is the Professor Baer's and Hector's work in recognizing the N2O formation during this reaction. This is our first data for the cyclic operation. In this cyclic operation, we have cycle period of 60 seconds, 30 seconds for the nitric oxide half cycle here, and 30 seconds for carbon monoxide half cycle. At 25 degrees centigrade, room temperature, we have no reaction. And 250 degrees, the catalyst becomes very active for nitric oxide reduction. For example, here, at the end of carbon monoxide half cycle, catalyst is under reduced state. And as soon as the nitric oxide half cycle starts here, nitrogen is produced by the decomposition of nitric oxide, but just for the first about 7 seconds. At about this time, the catalyst starts to lose its activity to decompose nitric oxide due to the accumulation of oxygen produced from the nitric oxide. And then unconverted nitric oxide starts to appear. And at the end of the nitric oxide half cycle, or at the start of carbon monoxide half cycle, CO2 is produced immediately because of the carbon monoxide oxidation using the oxygen stored on the catalyst during the nitric oxide half cycle. And when the oxygen is consumed, the carbon dioxide production is stopped. Now, we also see a lot of nitrous oxide formation during the nitric oxide half cycle. And also, I like to emphasize again that the catalyst is being deactivated due to the accumulation of oxygen derived from the nitric oxide during the nitric oxide half cycle. And this fact prompted us to think about some kind of alternative catalyst support which can scavenge that oxygen from catalyst surface more effectively than alumina catalyst. And one example of those kind of support we can think of is celia. Here, before going to that, I'd like to mention again here, we have two product formation, carbon dioxide here, and two nitrogen formation from here and here. And if we see these two products, CO2 and nitrogen, we can immediately note that those two products are in the wrong half cycle. What I mean is carbon dioxide production during nitric oxide half cycle and the nitrogen production during carbon monoxide half cycle. That's due to the storage effect or memory effect, if you like, of a catalyst surface to store carbon monoxide and nitric oxide during the other half cycle. And that kind of storage effect becomes less important as we raise the temperature, as we see here. Carbon dioxide and nitrogen in the wrong half cycle reduced at higher temperature, and it eventually disappears at even higher temperature, as it should. And we also don't notice any significant amount of N2O formation at higher temperature. Now, changing the subject a little bit, we compare the cyclic operational performance with the steady state performance of the catalyst. as we already published about the characteristic performance of a cyclic operation and steady operation, we observed the same trend. That is, above the reaction light of temperature, the steady state operation of catalyst performs better, while the below reaction light of temperature, cyclic operation performs better for binary surface catalytic reaction. And that seems to be kind of a principle when we have a binary surface catalytic reaction when we compare cyclic and steady operation. In examining further the effect of heat composition on the catalyst performance, we are going to use stoichiometric number, which is defined by the concentration ratio of nitric oxide to carbon monoxide on the time average basis. For example, SN1 is a stoichiometric composition, and less than 1 is net reducing condition, and greater than 1 net oxidizing condition. We did a steady state experiment at a different stoichiometric number. Curve A is a stoichiometric condition, and B is an oxidizing condition, SN number 2, and C is more oxidizing condition, SN number 3. The first thing we note is we have maximum in nitric oxide conversion during the NOCO reaction, like we see here. And the next thing we start to realize is that those maximum is not physically acceptable, because, for example, on curve C, the maximum possible conversion should be 33% because of a 3-to-1 ratio. If the reaction pathway is well known, traditional 1-to-1 stoichiometric. And to explain this extra conversion of nitric oxide beyond 33%, we have to invoke the incomplete reduction pathway, as I showed before. In addition to the complete reduction process, we have to invoke this incomplete reduction pathway, which has been largely ignored. And to check the validity of that incomplete reduction pathway, we examined that validity like this. In the upper part here, we note nitric oxide, the amount of nitric oxide reacted during the reaction, and the amount of carbon monoxide reacted, and we have discrepancies. It has to be the same if the reaction pathway is 1-to-1. Now, that difference is plotted in here on an open circle, and we measured N2O formation plotted here on in dots, and it correlates it almost perfect. So this indicates that the incomplete the reduction pathway is very important, especially at low temperature region. And we have compared the selectivity between incomplete reduction pathway and the complete reduction pathway by plotting the concentration ratio of nitrous oxide to nitrogen during the reaction. As we see here, the low temperature, incomplete reduction pathway is dominating, and high temperature, complete reduction pathway is dominating. Changing the subject a little bit, we examined also the effect of time average heat composition during this cyclic operation. As we see here, in both cases, above the reaction rate of temperature, when we increase the carbon monoxide concentration, the catalyst performance improves. However, below reaction light-off temperature, increasing carbon monoxide concentration impairs the catalyst performance. And this implies that above the reaction light-off temperature, the reaction rate controlling step is the rate of oxygen scavenging by carbon monoxide from the catalyst, while below the reaction light-off temperature, the rate of oxygen production by nitric oxide is rate controlling. And as I mentioned previously, we have examined the activity of rhodium ceria catalyst at 500 degrees, and if we compare the rhodium alumina activity with rhodium ceria activity with rhodium alumina activity, we notice significant improvement in the carbon monoxide and nitric oxide conversion efficiency by changing the support, as you will notice here. And after we observed a lot of N2O formation during NOCO reaction, we became curious about the possibility of a further reduction of nitrous oxide by reacting with the carbon monoxide. That's what we found. About 300 degrees, carbon monoxide reduces nitrous oxide for a complete reduction. And if we combine with the previous selectivity diagram, what we can expect is that around this valley, there must be some maximum in nitrous oxide formation. And that's what we exactly observed here. And finally, regarding the reaction pathway, on single crystal rhodium, it is kind of well known that on single crystal rhodium, the nitric oxide does not form nitrous oxide. However, Hecker and Bell observed a lot of nitrous oxide formation on rhodium silicon. But under their experimental condition, nitrous oxide didn't go any further to nitrogen under the carbon monoxide environment. We observed a slightly different result here, as I showed you. Nitric oxide forms N2O and N2, and N2O further reduces to form N2 by reacting with carbon monoxide. And the conclusion is that regarding the nitric oxide reduction by carbon monoxide, we found that in low temperature region, incomplete reduction is dominating, while at high temperature, complete reduction pathway is dominating. And the maximum we observed in the nitric oxide conversion is related to the nitrous oxide formation. And the rate controlling step of this reaction is changing depending upon the temperature. At low temperature, oxygen production is important. In high temperature, oxygen scavenging is important. And comparison of cyclic operation and steady operation shows us the same principle, which is below reaction light-off temperature, cyclic is better. And above reaction light-off temperature, steady is better. And we also observed the support effect, which we attribute to the greater oxygen storage capacity. And we are continuing to study this area. And also we are continuing to study this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Cho. I got one short comment or question from the audience. Alex.
Presumably this oxygen storage occurs by spillover of atomic oxygen from the rhodium onto the ceria?
We are thinking that way, yeah.
Think that way. Have you done any isotopic tracer work to confirm that that's in fact the correct picture?
We are doing, yes. And that's what we observe is that the oxygen stored or released, the amount of total oxygen stored or released is far more than you can explain by the rhodium surface.
Uh-huh. How much more than a monolayer is it?
About 10 times monolayer. In some cases, 20 times.